Real stories from real people. What's the creepiest post you've seen on Reddit? I can't remember the sub that the post was on, but it was about a young college woman who was raped and murdered in her apartment one night. Her body had not been found. The post included a video/clip of a news station interviewing one of the victim's friends who knew her through college. They were asking things like what was she like, did she have any enemies, etc., etc. Then during the live interview, the interviewer is notified that her body had been found in a public trash can. The reaction of the boy being interviewed will stick with me forever. You could see the blood drain out of his face and a look of absolute fear appear. He was speechless, then started asking about whether they had any leads or knew who it was. He was arrested that same day. The way he'd gotten into her high-rise apartment through a window was terrifying. Late to the party and on mobile, but if you Google homeless man under bed, you'll find the post of the girl who dropped her phone and went to pick it up and saw a man under her bed and managed to get out the house through the shower window, and the police came and said he was waiting outside the bathroom door with a knife. That one fucks me up. I actually remember reading a story on a Reddit when I first joined around 5 years back. The thread itself might have been even older, I don't know, but it really creeped me out. I'm hoping someone can remember and link it because I still haven't found it after a lot of searching. So basically, a family was on a road trip and they were driving on a countryside road at night when they saw a person with a broken car signaling them to stop. But the dad who was driving had a gut feeling something was wrong and kept driving. After they drove away from the scene, the kids, or the wife, not sure, looked back and saw a group of people rising from the field where they were hiding. That got me hooked on creepy Reddit stories. The thought of what might have happened if they stopped was just terrifying. A woman answered a Craigslist ad about an apartment. A man who claims to be the landlord answers, and during the tour she notices there's no furniture, and he starts to block the exit. He asks her to look in the basement, and by a stroke of luck or genius, she is able to escape. Cops find a tripwire on the basement stairs and homemade torture devices in the basement. Oh, and the room he slept in was covered in porn pictures. Horrifying. This post I read about a girl who let her dog out front to go potty, and she heard what sounded like her dog scratching the front door and making noises, and she looked out her peephole and saw a man on all fours pretending to be a dog trying to get into her house. This is pretty long. I'll try to summarize. Opie had a loud couple living above him. The guy got hauled off to jail, DV, and the girl asked for Opie's number under the guise of protection should the BF return. Well, from that she turned into a full-bore stalker, breaking into his apartment and surprising him virtually nude, propositioning both the Opie and his GF, tracking Opie down at his new apartment after he moved. Full-blown batshit crazy with several arrests mixed in. Opie moves several states away, things quiet down. His now ex-GF contacts him years later. Apparently batshit girl showed up at her work demanding info on Opie and security was forced to intervene. Sometime after that, she tracks down Opie's brother in college. More demands, gets thrown out on her ass. Doesn't give up, shows up at brother's job, gets beaten up by his female boss. At some point, I forget when, Batsit also masquerades as her own therapist trying to contact Opie on Facebook. He ignores, of course. Finally, Batsit is found dead at the bottom of a canyon or something months after the fact. It's scary as fuck what mental illness can do to someone. An innocent encounter became nearly a decade of obsession. I'll never forget that post. It didn't get nearly the attention it should have. Edit. The stalker is the one who died. I saw a post one time about someone that had one of those smart doorknobs with a camera. When the camera would detect motion, it would send to his phone the line, "You have a visitor." And he would keep getting that notification, and for some nights at random hours of the night between 11 p.m. to around 2 a.m., he got that notification, but the camera didn't detect anything. Whoever kept showing up, showed up about 4 or 5 times at 11 to 12, but then he showed up at 4 a.m. and pointed his face at the camera and looked very creepy. I think he was wearing a mask. After that, he didn't show up again. I'll link it if I find it. I remember reading a post of a young woman that was on a road trip through the U.S., and on one of her stops for the night at a cheap hotel in a small town, something didn't feel right about the interaction with the clerk, and later in the bedroom, she didn't feel comfortable. Also, the bed had bed bugs, and so she decided to sleep in her car. During that night, she woke up to some noises, and she saw the clerk and some other guys going into her room and closing the door behind them. Don't remember the numbers, but something like 2 guys enter the room, and few moments later 3 guys come out of it. It appears that maybe one guy has hiding inside the time she was in there. The guys came and checked the car where she was able to hid under her mount of dirty clothes and partially tinted windows. Reading that story really creeped me out and angered me. My blood boiled thinking, what if those guys was not the first time doing that? How many other victims are there? Recently on a creepy thread like this about creepy stories, a guy responded that when he was a kid he used to have a recurring nightmare about this one cave. He would be crawling and go down these turns and see trash and bodies, but in the nightmare, he could never make it to the final turn at the end because fear or something woke him up. Well, one day he goes with his dad to some cave, and as he's going down the cave he notices that it's the same exact cave from his nightmares. He has like a panic attack and he can't go down there. He never found out what was at the end and he ends up leaving. Well, it turns out that another Redditor recognized that cave by name, and his friend knows about the same cave. His friend loves cave exploring, but he refuses to speak about that cave. He said that his friend doesn't like to talk about it. It makes me wonder what was at the end of that cave. It was in response to one of the creepy experience posts on here, and I think they noticed weird, possibly paranormal things happening in their house, so they set up an audio recorder in the middle of the night. They had their dog locked either in a cage or in a room with a gate, and the commenter heard their own voice talking to the dog on the tape and the dog being really upset. They knew it wasn't actually themselves sleepwalking because they used an app on their phone that made noise to help them sleep, and they never heard their door open on the tape. I've been looking for it in old creepy story threads, and I can't find it. I don't know why it bothered me so much. Can't remember the link or even the subreddit, but there was a thread about a guy who lived an entire life. Met a girl, dated, got married, had kids, had a job, had a house, the whole 9 yards. And one day he notices something wrong with the lamp. He goes to investigate the lamp, and when he does, his reality literally tears apart until he wakes up on the ground, I think, surrounded by people. He had been knocked unconscious, and in the 5 seconds he had been out, his brain created an entire life that he lived through. Ended up with depression because these people that were so real to him, people that he loved, just disappeared. I have no source or link, but years ago someone posted a comment about camping somewhere out in bumfuck wilderness of Canada. Said camper was taking film pictures, only to get them developed and discover that someone had taken his camera and taken photos of him sleeping from far away. Every picture got closer, and he thought he'd been alone for days. It's been creeping me out since I read it. Please someone remember it so I can reread it. One story I remember reading was one of a maintenance guy or something working on an apartment building for new tenants to move in. Well, apparently he had been working on pipes or something and had placed a rag he had on some vents. Come 6 months later, he goes to work on the same building and he sees police swarming it. He's asking around what happened, and he comes to find out a family whose apartment he was working on 6 months ago died of monoxide poisoning. Cause of death was a rag left on some ventilation that could have vented all those harmful fumes out of the apartment in the first place. Really dark shit. What creepy stories do you know? Let's discuss in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to see even more interesting videos with real stories.